All right, so picture this. Your former prime minister recently kicked out of office, and you want to get the attention of the head of the army. How do you do it? A strongly worded email, maybe.
Not quite.
Try 3 open letters. That's what Imran Khan did. Sent them straight to General Asim Munir. Talk about a bold move.
Definitely a power move.
So today we're diving into Khan's third letter, the climax of this political thriller.
I like that. The climax.
Yeah, we'll unpack what's got him so fired up and what he wants to achieve with these letters, but buckle up. This deep dive takes us into some serious turmoil in Pakistan. Economic instability, political upheaval, the future of their democracy is hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's a tense situation for sure.
And it really makes you think, what happens when a country's civilian leader and the military are at odds like this? And what does it mean for the people caught in the middle?
Well, it's a precarious situation. There's no doubt about that. Pakistan's military and the civilian government have this long and complicated history. To say the least, coups, power plays, this constant back and forth over who's really in control. It's fascinating because Khan himself came to power with the military support, but clearly something went wrong.
Yeah.
That relationship has soured.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. Khan's main argument in this letter is that the military's interference in politics is destroying Pakistan. He's not asking for favors, he's sounding the alarm.
Yeah, it's a high-wire act he's trying to pull, criticizing this powerful institution, but at the same time appealing to their patriotism.
It's a risky strategy, for sure.
Very risky.
So Khan lays out his case in 5 key points. The first one he calls imposing rejected figures on the nation, basically accusing the military of rigging elections to put corrupt leaders in power. And get this, he even mentions Surrey Mansion and Mayfair Flats. Now, I'm no real estate mogul, but I'm guessing those aren't exactly known for affordable housing.
No, those are definitely meant to pique your interest, and they point directly at these long-standing corruption allegations against the Sharif and Zardari families, these political dynasties that have been major players in Pakistani politics for decades. Surrey Mansion and Mayfair Flats are properties that have been linked to their alleged ill-gotten gains. Khan also brings up the NAB, the National Accountability Bureau, which has been investigating these families for years.
Wait, so the NAB investigates corruption. What's Khan's problem with them then?
But that's the catch. The NAB has also been accused of being a tool for political vendettas, going after opponents and letting allies off the hook. It's a bit of a double-edged sword that Khan's using here.
Okay, so he's accusing the military of propping up these families and using the NAB to take down anyone who gets in their way. It's starting to sound like a high-stakes political chess match.
It is.
Okay, Khan's second point is the destruction of democracy. He claims the military systematically crushed democratic institutions to keep him and his party, the PTI, out of power. That's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, just in case anyone's wondering.
Right, and this ties right back into Khan's dramatic removal from office. In 2023, he was ousted through a no-confidence vote, which he claims was orchestrated by the military, and he hasn't let go of that.
Well, and here's a detail from the letter that really jumped out at me. Khan mentions an independent audit that found 64 new methods of election rigging. 64. That's not just bending the rules, that's practically inventing a whole new game.
Yeah, if those findings are true, it definitely raises some serious questions about the fairness and transparency of elections in Pakistan. It plays right into Khan's narrative that the military is manipulating the system to get their chosen candidates in power.
So on to point number 3, misplaced national priorities. Khan paints a bleak picture. Pakistan needs reform, but he says the current government is too busy clinging to power to even try, and he doesn't hold back. He calls the president fake and the parliament fraudulent, strong words from a former prime minister.
The irony here is that Khan himself was accused of being authoritarian when he was in office. But his point about misplaced priorities resonates with a lot of Pakistanis. They see their country struggling with poverty, terrorism, lack of basic services, while the political elites seem more interested in fighting for power than actually governing.
Right, so it's not so much that Khan's a saint, it's that he's tapping into this very real frustration that people feel. It's like he's saying, look, I may not have been perfect, but these guys are making things way worse, which is pretty compelling, even if you're not a huge Khan supporter.
It is, and there's data to support this. Take the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index, for instance.
Oh, yeah, I remember you mentioning that. How does Pakistan rank on that?
Not well. It's near the bottom, which indicates serious weaknesses in things like rule of law, accountability, government transparency. It basically suggests that the system itself is failing the people.
Which brings us to Khan's fourth point, brain drain. He argues that the oppression and instability are driving skilled Pakistanis to flee the country.
This is a big problem for Pakistan. They're losing their best and brightest doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs. They're going to countries where they feel safer and have more opportunities.
And Khan doesn't just talk about the economic cost of this brain drain. He talks about the human cost, too. He mentions reports of people dying at sea trying to escape, just a stark reminder of the desperation that so many Pakistanis feel.
Yeah, it's a tragic reflection of the lack of hope and opportunity within the country. And this exodus of talent makes the economic situation even worse. It makes it harder to attract foreign investment and break the cycle.
Okay, so we've covered 4 of Khan's key points, and it's a pretty damning picture. He's painting a country on the brink with its people caught in the middle. His final point, though, is maybe the most chilling. He calls it human rights violations and warns that Pakistan is descending into what he calls fascism. He even uses this really loaded phrase reminiscent of what transpired in East Pakistan before the fall of Dhaka. That's a comparison meant to send shivers down your spine.
He's deliberately invoking the memory of the events that led to the creation of Bangladesh in 1971. East Pakistan, as it was then known, seceded after a brutal crackdown by the Pakistani military. It's a dark chapter in Pakistan's history, and Khan is drawing a parallel to what's happening now.
And he doesn't shy away from the details. He talks about police raids on homes, people being abducted and tortured, political engagement being treated like a crime.
He specifically points to 2 incidents, May 9th, 2023 and November 26th, 2024. These were dates that saw violent crackdowns on protests, events that have become rallying cries for Khan and his supporters. They see them as evidence of the military's increasingly authoritarian grip on the nation.
So to sum up Khan's argument, he believes the military's actions are pushing Pakistan toward disaster. He's pleading with them to back off and let the country heal.
This letter is a clear sign of the deep divisions in Pakistan. Khan is channeling public frustration with the military's power, but challenging them like this is a huge gamble.
It definitely raises the stakes.
Yeah.
So with the players in this deadlock, can Pakistan find a way forward?
That's the million-dollar question. Khan's letter is a plea for change, but whether those in power will actually listen is another matter, and what will the consequences be if they don't? That's something we'll explore more as our deep dive continues.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it for now.
Sounds good. You know, what's really interesting here is that Khan is using history as a weapon. Like by bringing up East Pakistan, he's trying to shock the military into realizing what could happen if they don't change course. It's like saying, hey, if you don't watch out, we could end up with another Bangladesh situation.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to their past. A pretty dark chapter, too. But is that really a smart move? I mean, the military isn't exactly known for being open to criticism, especially not about something as sensitive as that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a risky strategy, but Khan's a savvy politician. He knows that public opinion is on his side. There's a lot of frustration with the military meddling in politics, and he's tapping into that.
So he's using that public pressure as leverage against the military, kind of turning the tables on them.
Exactly. He's trying to box them in so they can't just ignore him.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. Some people might say that Khan is partly to blame for this whole mess. After all, he came to power with the military support. Did he really think he could just turn around and bite the hand that fed him?
That's a fair point. The relationship between Khan and the military has always been complicated. He was their guy at first, but then things went south when he tried to assert his independence. And that's where the tension comes from. The military is used to calling the shots in Pakistan. They don't like being challenged, especially not by someone they helped put in power.
So it's like Khan is a victim of his own success, rose to power with their help, but then tried to break free. It's a classic power struggle.
You could see it that way. Some people would argue that Khan was naive to think he could outmaneuver the military, or maybe he underestimated how much power they really have.
All right, well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how all of this is affecting everyday Pakistanis. What are they experiencing on the ground?
Imagine living in a country where you feel like you have no voice, where the rules can change on a dime, and you're always looking over your shoulder. That's the reality for a lot of people in Pakistan right now.
Khan talks about a reign of terror. Is he exaggerating, or is there truth to that?
There's definitely a climate of fear. People are afraid to speak out, criticize the government or the military because they're worried about the consequences.
And it's not just activists or politicians, right? This affects everyone.
Everyone, journalists, academics, even ordinary people who post something critical on social media could get in trouble.
Khan also talks about the economic impact, poverty, unemployment, capital flight. What's it like for a typical Pakistani family trying to make ends meet?
It's incredibly tough. The economy's in a bad place, inflation is out of control, and jobs are scarce. Many families are struggling to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads.
And all of this is happening against a backdrop of political instability and a growing threat of terrorism that's a lot to deal with.
Absolutely, and it's leading to a sense of hopelessness and despair. That's why we see so many Pakistanis trying to leave the country, even if it means risking their lives.
So where does this leave Pakistan? What are the possible scenarios moving forward?
Well, predicting the future is never easy, especially in a situation this complex. But we can consider some possibilities. One scenario is the military just digs in their heels and tightens their grip on power. This could lead to more repression, more human rights abuses, and a deeper political crisis.
That's a grim outlook. Is there any chance of a more positive outcome?
There's always hope. Another possibility is that the military realizes that what they're doing isn't sustainable, that they need to step back, allow for more democratic space, and focus on their primary mission, which is national defense.
That would require a pretty big shift in their thinking, wouldn't it?
It would, but it's not impossible. The military isn't a single entity. There are different factions within the institution, and some may be more open to reform than others.
And what about Imran Khan? What role does he play in all of this?
He's a wild card. That's for sure. He's trying to use public opinion to put pressure on the military. But it's hard to say if he has a clear plan for what happens next. Some people see him as the only hope for restoring democracy. Others see him as a populist who's more interested in power than the good of the country.
So there are a lot of unknowns, a lot of moving pieces. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with only half the pieces.
That's Pakistani politics for you. Complex, unpredictable. There are no easy answers.
But one thing's clear, the stakes are incredibly high. The decisions made in the next few months or years will have a huge impact on the future of Pakistan and its people.
And that's why it's so crucial to understand the forces at play, the historical context, the competing interests. What happens in Pakistan doesn't stay in Pakistan. It has implications for the whole region, and even beyond, it's a reminder that we're all connected in a way. What happens in one part of the world can ripple outward and affect us all.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive, but I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack, so many questions still out there.
And that's the beauty of it. The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. And that's what keeps us coming back, keeps us engaged and curious.
You know, it's easy to get lost in the weeds when you're talking about these complicated political situations, but we can't forget that this is about real people's lives.
You're absolutely right. Every decision made at the top affects millions of Pakistanis. Their access to education, healthcare, even just feeling safe in their own homes.
Khan's letter really drives that point home. The brain drain, the desperation that makes people flee the country, the stories of police raids and abductions, it's chilling.
And it reminds us that behind all the politics and power struggles, there are human costs. Families are being separated, dreams are being crushed, lives are being lost. It's easy to forget that when we're talking about abstract ideas like democracy and national security.
So what does this mean for the future of Pakistan? Is there any room for optimism in the middle of all this turmoil?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's easy to feel pessimistic when you look at how things are right now, but there are glimmers of hope. The fact that Khan can write this letter and it's being shared and discussed shows that there's still some space for dissent, for challenging the status quo.
So the fact that we're even having this conversation, even though it's risky, is a positive sign.
Absolutely. It shows that people want change. They want a more democratic and accountable system. And that's where the real hope lies, not just in Khan, but in the people of Pakistan, in their resilience and their desire to create a better future.
But they're facing some pretty big obstacles. I mean, we're talking about a powerful military that's not used to giving up control, it feels like. David versus Goliath.
That's true, but history teaches us that even the most established systems can change. It often takes a spark, something to set things in motion. Who knows? Maybe Khan's letter will be that spark. Maybe it'll ignite a movement for change, a demand for accountability that those in power can't ignore.
It's definitely got people talking, and that's a start, right? Raising awareness, getting people involved in the conversation.
Absolutely. The more people understand the issues, the more they'll push for change. And the more likely it is that those in power will have to listen. Public pressure can be a powerful force.
So for our listeners who have been following along with us, what should they be looking out for in the coming weeks and months? What are the key things to watch?
I think the most important thing to watch is how the military responds to Khan's letter. Will they ignore it, dismiss it as just the ramblings of a bitter politician? Or will they take it seriously as a sign that they need to change what they're doing?
And what about the international community? Does Pakistan's future depend solely on what happens internally?
That's another crucial factor to consider. Pakistan depends a lot on foreign aid and investment. If a world starts seeing Pakistan as unstable or undemocratic, it could have a huge impact on their economy. It could isolate them even further on the global stage.
So there's a lot writing on how this all unfolds, not just for Pakistan, but for the whole region.
Exactly. This is a story with global consequences, and we're still in the middle of it.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive, but I feel like this conversation is just getting started. There's so much more to explore, so many unanswered questions. That's what makes this whole situation so captivating.
It's a reminder that the world is a complex and ever-changing place. And even when things seem really tough, there's always hope for a better future.
I think that's a great note to end on. So for our listeners, I want to leave you with this thought. What can we do, even from far away, to support the people in Pakistan who are working towards democracy and human rights? It's something to think about. When we talk about global politics, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff. But we can't forget that this is about real people. Their lives are being shaped by these decisions.
Oh, absolutely. Every decision made at the top has this ripple effect that impacts millions of Pakistanis.
Yeah.
Their access to things like education, healthcare, even just feeling safe at home.
And Khan's letter really brings that home.
Yeah.
The brain drain, people risking their lives at sea to escape those stories of raids and abductions, it's pretty chilling stuff.
It really is. It reminds us that behind all the political maneuvering, there are real consequences. Human costs, families being torn apart, dreams, shattered lives, lost. It's easy to lose sight of that when we're talking about big concepts like democracy and national security.
So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for Pakistan? Any reason for optimism in all this turmoil?
It's a tough question, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel pessimistic looking at the situation, but the fact that Khan could even write this letter and that it's being shared and talked about, that tells us something. I think there's still some space for dissent, for challenging the powers that be.
So you're saying the fact that this conversation is happening, even though it's risky, is a positive sign?
Exactly. It shows that people want change. They want a more democratic and accountable system. And that's where the real hope lies, not just in Khan himself, but in the Pakistani people. Their resilience, their desire for a better future.
But they're up against a powerful military, right? It's not like they're known for giving up control easily. This feels like a David versus Goliath situation.
It's true. It's a huge challenge. But history shows us that even the most established systems can change. It often just takes a spark, something to set things in motion. And who knows, maybe Khan's letter is that spark. Maybe they'll trigger a movement, a demand for accountability that those in power can't ignore.
It's definitely got people talking, and that's got to be the first step, right? Raising awareness, getting people engaged.
Absolutely. The more people understand what's at stake, the more they'll demand change, and the more likely it is that those in power will have to listen. Public pressure can be a powerful force.
So for our listeners who have been following this deep dive, what should they be paying attention to in the coming weeks and months? What are the key things to watch for?
I think the most important thing to watch is how the military responds to Khan's letter. Do they brush it off as just complaints from a disgruntled politician, or do they take it seriously as a sign that they need to change course?
And what about the international community? Does Pakistan's fate rest solely in its own hands?
That's another crucial element. Pakistan relies heavily on foreign aid and investment. If the international community starts to view Pakistan as unstable or undemocratic, it could have a devastating impact on their economy and lead to further isolation on the world stage.
So there's a lot riding on this, not just for Pakistan, but for the whole region.
Exactly. This is a story with global consequences, and it's still unfolding.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, so many unanswered questions. That's what makes this whole situation so captivating.
It reminds us that the world is constantly changing, and even when things seem bleak, there's always hope for a better future.
That's a great thought to end on. So for our listeners, I'll leave you with this. What role can we play, even from afar, in supporting the people of Pakistan who are striving for democracy and human rights? It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.